The cabin had been in my family for generations, nestled quietly on the northern bend of Rattlesnake Lake. It wasn't grand, just weather-worn cedar planks, a tin roof that pinged with every acorn fall, and a back porch that groaned under the weight of time and memories. But it was ours, all of it, every square inch of shoreline, every tree, every footpath hidden beneath the moss. My grandfather bought the land outright in 1954, and it had stayed untouched ever since, passed down like some sacred inheritance. What most people didn't know, what she didn't know, was that I owned not just the cabin, but the entire lake. All of it. It started with a note. Not the kind you'd expect, no neighborly welcome or a heads up about a bear sighting. This was typed, triple-spaced, and signed, K. Drummond, WA Enforcement. Slipped under the windshield wiper of my wife's SUV like some cheap parking citation. The ink was smudged from the morning dew, but the message was clear. Unauthorized lawn ornaments are not permitted within visual range of lakefront properties. Kindly remove the wind chime and flamingo statue within 48 hours. Wind chime. Flamingo. My wife had bought them both at a roadside antique store in town, thinking they added charm. Maybe they were a little kitschy, sure. But they weren't hurting anyone. And more to the point, this was our property. There was no homeowners association. There never had been. My wife laughed when she read it aloud, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the fire pit. I wish now we'd kept it. Documented everything. But how could we have known? How could we have anticipated what that note would lead to? The next week, my grandfather arrived. 82 and still sharper than most men half his age. He'd driven up in his old Chevy with a crate of tomatoes from his garden and a box of tools that rattled every time he hit a bump. He loved that cabin like it was a part of his own body, and he noticed things immediately. Who the hell trimmed that dogwood? He asked, squinting at the edge of the property. I hadn't noticed it before, but someone had hacked at it. Rough, uneven cuts, like whoever did it didn't care if it bled out. That same evening, we heard the footsteps. My wife and I were sitting on the porch, the dog asleep at our feet, when gravel crunched on the trail out front. We stood up just in time to see a figure disappear into the trees, tall, slight, stiff-backed, with a clipboard clutched to her chest. I didn't put it together until the third note came, this one nailed to the door. Failure to comply with WA regulations will result in fines and potential litigation. We will not tolerate nonconformity. Consider this your final warning. K. Drummond. Litigation. Fines. There was no WA. I stormed into town the next morning, marched straight into the county records office. It took an hour, but I confirmed what I already knew. No WA had ever been registered around Rattlesnake Lake. There were private properties dotting the eastern side, mostly weekenders, but the rest. All mine. When I returned to the cabin, there were stakes in the ground, bright orange plastic flags lined up like soldiers across my shoreline. That was the first time I saw her clearly. Karen Drummond. Pencil skirt, sensible flats, and a face so rigid it looked like it had been carved from plaster. She was directing two teenagers with measuring tape, talking into a walkie-talkie like she was orchestrating a military operation. I approached her, calm but firm. Introduced myself. Asked what she thought she was doing. You'll receive a parcel map in the mail, she said, not looking at me. We're redistricting for uniformity. Your parcel will be subdivided into 3. You may petition to retain 1/3. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. I told her the entire lake was deeded under one name. Mine. That she was trespassing. That the flags were illegal. She didn't blink. She just clicked her pen and said, refusal to cooperate will be noted. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did my wife. Neither did my grandfather. 2 days later, the shots came. It was early, just after 6. Mist still clung to the lake's surface like ghost breath. My wife had gone down to the dock to sketch. She loved the mornings best, said it made her feel like the world was still kind. Grandpa was checking the propane tank near the shed, humming some old country tune. The first shot rang out like a firecracker. Then another. The scream that followed was my wife's. I bolted from the porch barefoot, the screen door slamming behind me. I didn't feel the stones, didn't notice the cold. All I saw was her slumped on the dock, hand to her shoulder, blood blooming fast through her white sweatshirt. Grandpa was already down, flat on his back by the shed, clutching his chest. And standing at the edge of the trees, rifle still raised, was Karen Drummond. She didn't run. She didn't speak. Just stared at me like I was the problem. When the deputies arrived, two of them, both young and nervous, she was sitting cross-legged beside my unconscious grandfather, muttering something about noncompliance threats and code enforcement privilege. They didn't arrest her. Not right away. Not until I showed them the deeds. Not until I handed over a flash drive of security footage from the cabin's new cameras. Not until the paramedics stabilized my wife and one of the EMTs quietly muttered, "What kind of what is this?" The truth is, Karen had built her fantasy empire on a lie. She wasn't part of any official organization. She'd created her own HOA, from scratch, drawn up maps, printed stationery, handed out fake citations. She believed she had jurisdiction over the lake, because she wanted to. Because she thought no one would challenge her. But I wasn't just a lakefront owner. I was the owner. And she had no idea who she was dealing with, of course. Here's part 2 expanded to approximately 1,000 words. The emergency siren still echoed faintly across the lake as I stood ankle-deep in blood and disbelief on the dock. My wife had been airlifted, my grandfather taken away in a body bag. I hadn't spoken a word since the deputy handed me the shell casing they pulled from the wooden cabin wall, 8.223 round. Precision shot. HOA Karen, the woman we had all written off as a loudmouth, had been lurking in the trees with a scoped rifle like she was reenacting some twisted version of a suburban Rambo fantasy. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. My hands were raw from gripping the wheel on the drive to the sheriff's office, then to the hospital, then back to the lake house where everything had gone quiet. But that kind of silence wasn't peace. It was void. The kind that swallows everything and leaves you thinking in fragments. I stood in the living room, glass still cracked where the second round had barely missed me. The same HOA that wrote me a fine for letting my dock lights stay on too late had now tried to kill my family. What none of them knew, or ever cared to ask, was that I didn't just own a cabin on the lake. I owned the entire damn lake. The water. The shoreline. The woods. The access roads. Every inch of it, purchased in a tax lien auction after the previous resort owner defaulted on nearly 15 years of back property taxes. While Karen and her little band of neighborhood vigilantes thought they had authority here through their fake HOA, their whole operation was a sham, a legally powerless social club puffed up by passive-aggressive newsletters and collective delusion. I spent the next 2 days reviewing every single document, surveys, deeds, permits. I even pulled the old plat maps and went through them with a magnifying glass. The result was clear. The HOA's jurisdiction didn't even reach the gravel trail that led to the property, let alone my land. Their only access point to the lake was through a right-of-way I had been letting them use out of neighborly goodwill. That ended now. Karen hadn't been arrested yet. Law enforcement was investigating, and wanted to be careful not to jump to conclusions. They called it a dispute gone wrong, and some of the sheriff's deputies already seemed too cozy with the HOA board. It became obvious to me that no one was going to handle this unless I forced it into the open. So I started making calls. First, I hired a private security firm, not the mall cop kind but real guys, former military, who set up cameras and patrols around the lake. Then I called the local paper, told them exactly what happened, and gave them photos of the bullet holes, my wife's bandaged torso, and the signed medical statements from the hospital. I attached a copy of the deed showing I was the sole legal owner of the lake and shoreline. They didn't publish it, too sensitive, while the investigation was open, but word started to spread. It didn't take long before I got my first threat. An anonymous letter stuffed in the mailbox at the edge of the road read, "You don't belong here. Sell and leave. You've brought enough trouble." The handwriting was sloppy, but the tone had Karen's cadence. Passive threat wrapped in pretend civility. Classic. She didn't know I had a motion camera hidden in the treeline now, capturing everyone who came within 50 feet of the house. That footage, her sneaking in at dawn with gloves on, went straight to my lawyer. By the weekend, I had filed a cease and desist against the entire HOA board for harassment and unauthorized use of private property. My lawyer, a sharp woman with a fire for these kinds of cases, also filed a civil suit for emotional distress and attempted murder, naming Karen directly. She laughed when she heard Karen's actual name, Karen Ann Rutherford. "You're telling me Karen did this?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "That's poetic." Still, none of it brought peace. My wife was home now, stitched together but sleeping in 15-minute cycles, jerking awake at every branch that snapped outside. Grandpa's chair remained in the same spot on the porch, but without him, the place felt hollow. He was the one who taught me to fish, to build, to stand my ground. The thought that he died trying to protect our land haunted every corner of the cabin. Then something changed. One of the security guys flagged me down after reviewing trail camera footage. "You're going to want to see this," he said. The footage showed Karen, again, walking the woods with a clipboard. Taking photos. Marking trees. She had on camouflage this time. She wasn't alone. Two other HOA members followed behind her, one of them dragging what looked like spray paint. They were marking my trees. Planning something. That was the last straw. The next day, I rented out the boat launch and erected a steel gate with a keypad. I sent official letters to every resident around the lake. Notice that their access was suspended pending formal, individual agreements with me. I made it clear, the HOA's blanket usage was revoked. Those who had been respectful could sign new permits. Those involved in the threats, stalking, or violence. Lifetime bans. Karen was livid. She tried to rally the neighborhood, calling for an emergency meeting at the community center. I went too, but I didn't speak. I just stood there and recorded it all as she ranted about tyranny and losing their lake to an outsider. Her voice trembled when someone in the crowd asked, "Did you really shoot someone?" She didn't answer. Just changed the subject. When the civil suit was announced publicly, the tone shifted. The same people who used to wave at Karen and bring her casseroles suddenly had other plans. She had gone too far. A couple residents even came to me privately, saying they were sorry. That they had no idea she was capable of that. I didn't forgive them, but I nodded. As for law enforcement, the tide turned after my lawyer filed a motion to involve state investigators. The sheriff's department, clearly feeling the pressure, finally took Karen in for questioning. Her house was searched. Firearms confiscated. Charges were pending, and the DA hinted there might be enough to pursue attempted murder. I stayed at the lake house through the summer, rebuilding. Not just the porch or the broken dock, but the soul of the place. I planted flowers where the blood had dried. Hung Grandpa's hat on the coat hook like he was still around. And every night before locking the doors, I walked the perimeter of the property, making sure no shadows lingered where they shouldn't. They had tried to scare me off. Tried to take what wasn't theirs and break what they couldn't control. But they made one mistake. They forgot I owned the lake. And I wasn't going anywhere.